Is that okay?
Yes, looks good.
All right. So thank you once again, Christian. And on behalf of the co-organizers, IIB Ventures and GSMA, welcome everyone to the APAC Connected Grown Workshop. I think it's an honor for all of us. I see very familiar faces. I also see some very new faces that I've not seen before, but I think today it's a very welcome session that we're discussing the topic of how the connectivity between the three key industries that are growing uh, despite this pandemic and how we can further support what we're trying to do here. So next, please. Can I have the next? Okay. Allow me to begin by a quick introduction. We from IIB Ventures are part of the Iskandar investment group, where for those who are not familiar, the regional project of Iskandar, Malaysia, which is in the southern part of Malaysia, bordering Singapore, started some 15 years ago. So we started in 2006 as part of the government of Malaysia's plan to spread the economic development throughout the country. So a lot has happened. We'll share a bit about the journey specifically with regards to different industries and ecosystem building and what we play and continue to advocate here in Iskandar, Malaysia. But we are part of a 30-year journey. So today, if this journey that we are sharing with you, we are halfway through that journey, if you can say that, and we have just kind of like entered into a more mature stage of our teenage life as a regional development. So we'd like to share that progress and see how we can progress further with you. Next, please. So in the early days in 2006, for the first 5 to 10 years, we worked very hard on identifying the right kind of planning that is required and also trying to identify the right kind of clustering that needed to go in place. So the first phase involved a lot of planning on what was already the traditional industries and economies of Iskandar, Malaysia, or more specifically the state of Johor, which was looking at tourism, looking at healthcare, and looking at property. We did not get involved in the manufacturing, industrial, agricultural type of industries because we felt for a greenfield development such as Iskandar, Malaysia, we wanted to focus on the future and see what would be sustainable for the future moving forward. So a lot of the foundations, a lot of the partnerships were formed in the early days, and a lot of emphasis was in laying the right kind of infrastructure, the right kind of foundations and connectivity, the highways, the roads, the public transport and things like that to go into place. We also place a lot of emphasis on education, where the development of what today is known as EduCity started as one of the earliest projects that we undertook to see how that we could continue to develop the talent and the workforce that will support the industries that we bring into Iskandar, Malaysia. So today we have a host of universities from the UK, from the Netherlands, from Malaysia itself, with a whole array of education offerings in the areas of healthcare, engineering, IT, technology, business, and things like that, that would today support the kind of talent that is required in the companies that come into Iskandar, Malaysia. And then we moved into a different phase. We're trying to say that, okay, since the hardware is already there, what about the software? Which means how do we create not just the workforce and the jobs to come into the location, but also to understand how do we create a community within that area. So I'll speak a little bit about that. And then we moved on into saying, how do we pivot into the next kind of growth that we want to look at, which is looking at innovation and emerging technologies. So that's pretty much how we started and what is the overview of what we plan to share throughout this session here today. Next, please. So a bit of background, starting something new, as what you will hear from many of the panelists today, is something that will bring about a sense of deja vu, because not everything needs to be completely new when you develop it. So similarly for us, when we looked at the drone and robotics zone in Iskandar, Malaysia, and what were the kind of activities, what were the kind of uh, developments that we need to put into DRZ Iskandar, we look back at our own achievements, our own challenges that we faced over the last 7 to 8 years. When we began GBS Iskandar, our first company that came on board was a company called Frost & Sullivan. Some of you may have heard of this company. They're based out of Silicon Valley. They're in about 50 locations around the world. And when we first started with them in 2012, the big challenge we had was no one was here. And whenever we spoke to any companies to say, would you like to set up your global business service operations in Iskandar, Malaysia, many of them would kind of politely tell us, I wouldn't want to be the first one. There are going to be a bunch of challenges. And the topics that you will hear throughout the session today, I think will echo around those lines. Are the policies in place? Is the infrastructure in place? Do you have the necessary talent? Do we have the coordination and collaboration between the industries, the regulators, the academia, and so on? So that was a big challenge. And we were thankful that Frost & Sullivan today continues one of the main stakeholders of Iskandar, Malaysia, where they were the first company to take a leap of faith with us to say, let's house our Center of Excellence in Iskandar, Malaysia. From there on, of course, we took on the challenge to try to identify how do we create this sector in Iskandar, Malaysia. And over the next 5 to 6 years, we secured over 25 other companies who were willing to come on board. We created over 6,000 jobs in that area. And then we realized that global business services meant to be a stepping stone for the next step that we were going to take, which we understood that if we stayed in a commoditized industry, then eventually we would plateau and that growth will just stay stagnant into what we're trying to develop, which is eventually a sustainable development for a better regional development for Johor. So we quickly pivoted into a new area called emerging technologies. We started bringing in companies that were doing blockchain technology, that were doing mobile games development, looking also at chip design, Internet of Things, 3D printing, and so on. And we realized that, look, given the scenario back in 2018, 2019, if we didn't do something to tap on this opportunity, we would just take it by chance, and then we would not be able to grow and pivot into that area. So we quickly realized, and we did a collaboration and discussion with many of our stakeholders and identified blockchain as one of the new areas that we would concentrate. We would try to come up with a more structured plan and activities that would grow the blockchain community and the blockchain activities within Iskandar, Malaysia. So in 2019, we launched Blockchain Village at Berdini. And today we have about almost 10 companies that are doing blockchain activities from Japan, from India, from Singapore, from China, and Malaysia in Iskandar, Malaysia. Next, please. So after doing GBS Iskandar and after launching Blockchain Village at Berdini, the thing that happened, as you all know, was in March of 2020 that COVID-19 happened. That kind of like threw a spanner to all of us, but we looked at it to say that, okay, so if this has happened, what's next? So we realized that in doing what we were currently doing, almost quickly through the discussions with various stakeholders, the companies, the regulators, they realized that if we sat still and we did not look at what would be next, anticipating that everybody, you know, in the early days, I'm sure many of us would have been in the same boat to say that, oh, when COVID is over, when COVID would be over, then we will go back to doing this, we'll do this, we'll wait until that happens, we'll wait until that happens before we carry on doing the next thing that we had planned previously. So we realized that within the industry and the development that we were doing, that if we were to wait until things were to say, go back to normal before we could do what we planned to do, you know, that was kind of like going to be a long wait. And true enough, 1 year later or 1.5 years later for many of us, we're still waiting until that thing happens. And we have come to a realization that it might not happen. We have to quickly adapt. We have to quickly make those adjustments and identify what's next in the event that today the economy changes, the landscape changes, and things need to be developed in a different way because the requirements have changed. So we realized that, and we came up with something called Iskandar Next, which was going to be the next 5 years of the planning for Iskandar Malaysia through Iskandar Investment Berhad's public-private partnership with the state government and also with the federal government of Malaysia to identify what would be the new economies, the new areas that we would put our resources and planning into. How do we create a better experience in handling the investments, in handling the developments here in Iskandar Malaysia? And one continued theme is that talent. That although we say new talent, but we consistently point out that talent development in upskilling, reskilling, new education programs, new training programs need to be developed so that the region actually is able to cope with the new demands. Next, please. So one of those initiatives, as we are here today, we're thankful that GSMA is partnering with us to help us to further coordinate and collaborate this development is the development of DRZ Iskandar. DRZ Iskandar was launched towards the end of 2020 by the Honorable Chief Minister of Johor, focusing on drone and robotics in Iskandar, Malaysia. 5 years ago, if you told us that the state of Johor wants to do drone and robotics, let alone led by the state government of Johor, this is something that is, people would say, is unthinkable. The state government for the longest time focuses a lot on the industrial manufacturing, petrochemical industries in Johor. But today, I think true that we have not only put the state of Johor and the region of Iskandar, Malaysia on the Malaysia map as one of the 3 locations for knowledge-based services after the Klang Valley and the state of Penang. Today, Johor is the 3rd location that is in Malaysia on emerging technologies and digital technologies. But we have also been able to introduce the state government and the other agencies around it to adapt and adopt digital technologies, IR 4.0, emerging technologies as one of the key driving pillars for the economy for the state of Johor. So today, DRZ Iskandar represents not just the lessons and the challenges that we've acquired over the last 7-8 years through the GPS Iskandar and the Blockchain Village Berdini programs, but it also represents that today there is a lot of continued support. There is also a lot of collaboration and coordination towards the planning of new projects going forward. So today in the DRZ Iskandar program, I think you see we have a host of stakeholders within our ecosystem, not just the few there. I think there are about at least 70 to 80 stakeholders, including federal and state governments, industry associations, industry players, the universities, and also those who are, promoting other industries and this industry alike. We've also designated 2 test sites, which is the VLOS and VVLOS test site within our own location. We continue to advocate and promote drone and robotics as one of the key industries of the future. And as what I've also noticed that when you talk about coordination and collaboration in drone and robotics, it's a whole value chain that we need to address. It's understanding that if the future is about unmanned aircraft and unmanned aircraft services, then we have to identify that the future will be about being able to do it with a BVLOS facility and all capabilities. But to do that, you need to have the right kind of infrastructure. And to do that infrastructure, you need to have the right kind of regulation. And with that right regulation, you need to do the right kind of enforcement. So it's a whole value chain that I hope today, I understand through the program, we'll be discussing a lot about that. And I think that's very encouraging because we noticed that, be it drone and robotics, business services, or any kind of industry that we're trying to promote, if there is no coordination and collaboration to understand the whole scope of work that needs to go into the development of an industry, eventually that's going to slow down the development, or eventually, it's not going to be able to be successful in any location. Next, please. So today, we've also understood that while the convergence and the coordination of various industry verticals is highly required for any kind of cross development across the sectors. For example, we're talking about mobile and telecommunications with aviation and drone industry. So those are three very big industry pillars that we're trying to see the convergence. We also realize that part of that development requires the fabric that would weave it together, which is the horizontals that we feel need to support any kind of development. So these are the things that we're looking at. One is continued talent development. We know that we need to have the right kind of community. So lifestyle is something that we continue to develop and work with our stakeholders, the property developers, the government agencies, and so on how we can create the right kind of environment for the talent that we want. We continue to support and participate and collaborate on events. We recently launched Ignite, which is our technology exchange. And today, I think we're very happy to be part of this program with GSMA. And of course, we continue to develop the right kind of infrastructure that is one for the future. So today, a lot of labs, a lot of workshops, a lot of flexible working spaces is something that we're focusing on for the development of the new kind of emerging technologies that we're developing in Iskandar, Malaysia. Next. So, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, we continue to build bridges. This is something that we are very passionate about. We know that, at the end of the day, if we're going to create jobs, we're going to create a community, we want to change lives. We want to be able to do something that is impactful through the development of an ecosystem that is established so that people and businesses can thrive. And at the end of the day, it is the community that actually prospers from what we do. So today, hopefully, this is something, beginning of our collaboration with the various stakeholders. We thank many of those who are here, the industry associations, the regulators from the governments, the CAM, IMDA, even CASA from Australia, I believe, is participating with us today. We have the various industry experts like Aerodyne, OneSky, Telstra, who will speak to us about the topics today. So we're very happy for that. And once again, I believe after this, you'll hear a lot of lessons, a lot of discussions that I hope will be engaging and beneficial to all of us. So thank you very much. I hand it back to you.